She didn't quit because she found some higher calling. She didn't quit because a hero swooped in to save her. She quit because her body and her mind were simply done negotiating. In places like Canada, people love to believe sex work is a choice. That word sounds so clean, doesn't it? Empowering, comfortable. It helps everyone else sleep a little better at night. But what nobody talks about is what happens after you try to leave. Her name isn't important. That's not for drama, that's just reality. In this world, names get you judged faster than facts ever could. She entered sex work at 21. Not because she was reckless, but because rent doesn't care about your morals, and survival doesn't wait for perfect options to appear. At first, she told herself it was temporary. 6 months, maybe a year, just enough to get stable. That's the first lie this industry sells you, that you're in control. In the beginning, she tracked everything: hours, clients, money. She had rules, she had boundaries. She believed that discipline would be her shield, and for a little while, it was. Until it wasn't. By the time she was 24, she'd paid off her debts, helped her family back home, and was renting a decent apartment. From the outside, it looked like success. But on the inside, it felt like erosion. It wasn't one big, traumatic event. It was thousands of small ones. The constant pretending, the hypervigilance, the slow, quiet death of trust. So one night, after a client left without any incident, which somehow made it feel even worse, she sat on the edge of her bed and realized something both simple and brutal. If I don't stop this right now, I won't recognize myself later. Quitting wasn't some dramatic movie scene. There was no final client, no big goodbye. She just deleted the numbers, closed the accounts, and packed away clothes that no longer felt like clothes. She expected to feel relief. Instead, she got silence. And that's the second lie people tell you. That leaving is the easy part. The real punishment starts after you walk away. She started applying for jobs. Retail, reception, admin assistant, call centers. She tailored every single resume. She smiled in interviews. She answered that dreaded employment gap question as carefully as she could. I was dealing with some personal responsibilities. That sentence followed her everywhere, and still no callbacks. Weeks bled into months. Background checks would flag inconsistencies. Her references were deemed insufficient. She watched interviewers turn cold the moment they sensed there was a story hiding beneath her story. Nobody ever accused her directly. They didn't have to. Stigma doesn't shout. It just quietly closes doors in your face. Her savings dwindled. Her anxiety skyrocketed. The same society that tells you to just get a real job never explains how you are supposed to do that when your past disqualifies you from the present. Friends started to drift away. Not because they hated her, but because discomfort is contagious. People don't know how to sit with someone who breaks their neat little narrative of how the world works. Then, eventually, she just stopped mentioning herself. Here's the part that nobody likes to hear. Leaving sex work doesn't erase what it took from you. It just removes the paycheck that was distracting you from the cost. Her sleep became fragmented. Crowded places started triggering panic attacks. Intimacy, even when it was genuine, felt transactional. And worst of all, a toxic thought began to creep in. Maybe she didn't deserve a normal life at all. That's how these systems win, not by trapping you inside forever, but by convincing you that leaving has made you unfit for anything else. By the end of that year, she was facing a choice she never thought she'd have to face again: go back or fall completely through the cracks. And this is where most stories would lie to you. They'd show you a triumphant escape or a tragic collapse. But real life is much uglier. She didn't go back, but she didn't fully escape either. She started taking under-the-table work, short-term gigs, anything that didn't ask too many questions. She was back in survival mode, and somewhere in that daily grind, a thought started to haunt her, a question that followed her everywhere she went. If society refuses to let you leave, was it ever really a choice to begin with? If you found this story important, please share it. Freedom sounds loud in speeches. In real life, it's quiet and often terrifying. After she quit, there was no applause, no reset button, just long, empty days where nothing felt solid anymore. When people say, "at least you're free now," they imagine freedom as a huge relief. What she felt was pure disorientation. For years, her identity had been a transaction. Time for money, attention for safety. Even her emotions had a price tag. When that whole structure disappeared, so did the rules of who she was allowed to be. This is the first mental cost nobody prepares you for. When survival becomes your personality, you forget how to exist without it. She'd wake up anxious, without knowing why. Her body stayed on high alert, even in safe rooms. Loud footsteps made her flinch. A man standing too close in a line made her heart race. Nothing was actually happening, but her nervous system didn't care. Trauma isn't about what happened, it's about what your body learned to expect. People love to debate whether sex work is empowering or exploitative, but that entire debate collapses the moment you listen to the aftermath, because empowerment doesn't leave you dissociating in grocery stores. Another lie she had swallowed was this: "I chose this, so I can't complain." That belief kept her silent. She didn't feel like she was allowed to struggle. After all, no one forced her at gunpoint. She paid her rent. She made money. From the outside, she looked completely functional. So she invalidated her own pain. That's how damage goes untreated, not because it isn't real, but because it's morally inconvenient for others. Intimacy became complicated, not because she hated men or because she was broken. It was because her brain had learned a dangerous shortcut. Attention equals obligation. Even simple kindness felt suspicious. Compliments felt like preludes to something more. Silence felt safer than closeness. She wasn't cold, she was guarded in ways she didn't consciously choose. This is where the empowerment narrative really fails. Empowerment assumes you have control, but control requires a stable sense of self. When your boundaries were repeatedly negotiated just to survive, you don't just rebuild them by quitting a job. You rebuild them by relearning where you end and other people begin. That can take years, sometimes decades. She tried therapy. Some therapists helped. Others didn't know what to do with her story. A few subtly judged her. One asked, "Do you regret it?" That question sounds harmless, but it isn't. Regret implies there was a cleaner, better past available, which often isn't the case. What she felt wasn't regret. It was grief. Grief for the version of herself that never got to exist without being priced. There's another uncomfortable truth people avoid. Leaving sex work doesn't mean you leave the power dynamics behind. They follow you into job interviews, relationships, friendships. You become hyper-aware of how people see you. You start editing yourself before others can. She wasn't ashamed of what she did. She was exhausted from what it cost her. And then came the anger. Anger at clients who treated her like a service. Anger at a system that profits from desperation. Anger at people who loudly defended the industry but disappeared the moment she needed help getting out. Support is easy in theory but rare in practice by this point. She understood something deeply unsettling. Society loves the idea of choice because it removes responsibility. If it was her choice, then no one owes her support. No safety net, no help with reintegration, no forgiveness, just judgment disguised as neutrality. She didn't spiral. She didn't collapse. But she lived in a constant in-between state, not who she was, but not yet who she wanted to be. Functional on the surface, but fragmented underneath. And yet, here's the part that doesn't fit into neat narratives. She didn't wish to erase her past. She just wished people would stop pretending that surviving something means it didn't wound you. By the end of this phase, she stopped asking, "Why am I still like this?" and started asking a more dangerous question. Who benefits from pretending this damage doesn't exist? She'd reached a point where she stopped asking what was wrong with her. That question was useless. The real question was sharper, colder, and far more dangerous. Who benefits when leaving sex work is almost impossible? Because this level of difficulty is never accidental. Systems don't fail this consistently just by coincidence. In places like Canada, sex work sits in a strange moral limbo. You've got politicians arguing, activists shouting, and academics debating. Everyone claims to speak for sex workers, but very few actually build the structures that help them exit. And that gap isn't neutral, it's profitable. Think about it. If entering an industry is easy, but leaving it is costly emotionally, socially, and economically, then that industry maintains its labor supply without using force. No physical chains needed, just pressure. That isn't freedom. That's soft containment. Society tells women like her, "You're empowered." But empowerment without real exit options is just branding, not liberation. And here's the hypocrisy people don't want to confront. The same culture that defends sex work as valid labor rarely treats former sex workers as valid employees. If it's just a job, why does it stain every resume afterward? If it's just work, why is reintegration treated like a moral risk? Nobody answers that honestly, because the honest answer is uncomfortable. We tolerate the work, but we don't respect the worker. When it comes time to leave, the clients vanish. The advocates move on to the next debate. The online supporters who cheered you on disappear the moment help requires actual money, mentorship, or social risk. Support dries up exactly where it matters most. And the state. The state loves ambiguity. Ambiguous laws reduce responsibility. Ambiguous protections reduce accountability. An ambiguous moral stance lets everyone look progressive without actually committing any resources. She also noticed something else. Something people hate to hear. Most help programs are designed for visibility, not for effectiveness. They're workshops that teach you how to write a resume without addressing trauma. They're hotlines that listen but don't actually place you anywhere. They're campaigns that say you matter without ever changing discriminatory hiring practices. These things soothe the public conscience, but they don't change outcomes. This is why many people return to the work, not because they want to, but because it's the only place where their past doesn't immediately disqualify them, where their experience counts instead of condemns them. Calling that a choice is deeply dishonest. It's like pushing someone into deep water, handing them a small floaty, and then blaming them for not swimming to shore. Another truth she learned the hard way: moral narratives matter more than facts. If society labels you a victim, you're pitied but controlled. If it labels you empowered, you're abandoned but blamed. Neither category allows for complexity, and real human beings are nothing but complexity. She wasn't asking for praise. She wasn't asking for forgiveness or even for sympathy. She was asking for something far more threatening: normalcy, the ability to exist without having to constantly explain herself. The ability to apply for a job without hiding a part of her life, to form relationships without suspicion, to fail at something new without being told it's because of her past. That's when it became clear. The hardest part of leaving wasn't the money, the trauma, or the fear. It was being permanently reduced to just one chapter of her life. Society claims to believe in growth, in second chances, in reinvention. But those beliefs collapse the moment they're tested by a little discomfort. It's easy to say people can change. It's much harder to hire them, befriend them, trust them, or stand next to them publicly. So where does that leave her? Not broken, not saved, not triumphant, just honest. She built a new life slowly, unevenly, with compromises that nobody applauds. She learned to stop expecting closure from a world that benefits from unfinished stories. And she stopped telling her story to convince people. She tells it now as a warning. Not about sex work itself, but about what happens when a society pretends to be neutral while quietly enforcing punishment. Because the final truth is this: if leaving costs more than staying, then the system is lying, not the person trapped inside it. And until that changes, stories like hers won't be rare. They'll just remain inconvenient. Thanks for listening.